viewers, welcome back to this week's episode of the Inter-University Debates. This week we're discussing the cost of education and whether students and parents are actually getting value for their money. My name is Douglas Drake. I am your moderator for this week's conversation. And joining me to discuss this very intriguing and interesting conversation is a panel of distinguished and highly profiled young people who will help us unpack the conversation. So just before we get into the intricacies of the conversation, I'll just quickly let the panel go ahead and introduce themselves, and we can get into the nitty-gritties. Otherwise, I'll just begin from my immediate right. Gentlemen, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Onen. I am Ejoyat Joel, and I'm excited to be here from the School of Social Sciences, Makerere University.
Thank you. We're looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you, Joel, and we're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
The lady, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Nkalubo Oprah Blessed. I'm a law student at Makerere University, the Vice President of the Children's Reference Group under UNICEF and Ministry of Gender, and I just can't wait to unpack this great conversation that will really help shape the education system in Uganda at large.
Thank you. I'm very happy to have you here, and I'm looking forward to getting the insights from people in UNICEF. I think that would be an interesting perspective.
Definitely.
The gentleman who has appeared on a couple of youth shows on Civic Space TV, we're happy to have you again here and very thrilled and looking forward to an interesting conversation. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Comrade Onen. My name is Hafashimana Asiimwe, and I am associated very much to Chisoro because that's where I'm born from. I come from Kyambogo University, but I have also been a recent graduate at the Youth Line Forum for the third cohort. And while here, I will be comparing notes with my colleagues to ensure that we find a nexus of this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Looking forward to having an interesting conversation with you as well. Gentleman who has been on the media and he's a journalist in the making, a very profound and known activist in the climate spaces. But today he's going to talk about education. I think there's an intersectionality between the two. But nonetheless, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Drake. Hello, our viewers. My name is Jotham Alinaitwe from Uganda Christian University, a final student of journalism, media, and communication, a fellow with Future Elect under the East Africa Public Leadership Academy in Nairobi, and a new cohort of Media Challenge Initiative. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Congratulations upon your being taken in.
We need a cake.
Don't worry.
Must cut one. Otherwise, the lady, it's prudent that I start with you, the fact that we have four formidable gentlemen here and you're the only highly qualified person. I think
She is an opposite.
Definitely. So I'll start with you, Oprah. Few weeks back, as the holidaymakers were headed back to school, the issue relating to high costs of school fees, requirements, etc., was a discourse that cut across various media channels, but even social media as well. And even it led or called upon it had to call upon the Parliament to actually debate upon it on the floor of the August House, which I think something is going to be done about it. But nonetheless, we are getting perspective of our students. So as you open up the conversation today, we'd just like you to look at giving us a background to this conversation, but not only giving us a background, but I'd like to get your insight on how you're going to flow or go about with this discussion.
All right, thank you very much. On that topic, obviously when the school fees rates increase, we then most times we look at the schools and say, oh, schools are expensive, but it's so important to go back to the root and really check why are these prices increasing. You realize that we generally have inflation going on in our country, and the prices of so many things have increased. And because of that, as these prices keep increasing, even the people themselves who would be our teachers, our cooks, our security guards in these different systems also then need more money or more purchasing power to be able to buy these different goods. So at that ground, for schools to be able to continue in their service delivery of education, they should be able to facilitate their teachers, they should be able to facilitate different staff, but also to feed the children, to provide scholastic materials for the students as well. So all these together lead to increase in the different prices, mostly here in Uganda. So when you have an issue that is not really a school issue, but then it stems from what we're going through as a country, then you ask yourself really, who then delivers? Do the schools deliver? Do the students deliver? But then where the parents left, because the parents go look for the money in this whole equation. So what you're going to be getting from me is really how schools are delivering. Yes, they have increased prices, but does the standard of education increase? Do we see children passing more and then coming to the students themselves with the facilities that have been put in place, with the money that has been given to their parents? At the end of the day, a child is expected to perform, but do they perform? Do they actually do well? So these are issues that we're going to be handling as the conversation goes on. And then for the parents, really, I believe that the parents' role is to look for money and put children in school. So at the end of the day, the parent is at the mercy of the child. You're going to put in your money, but you really pray that your child delivers, because you can't instill wisdom in the child. The child really has to go to school and put the resources that you have laid for them at good use, and then you as a parent, you're then proud of your child. So that's what we're going to be getting from this discussion.
All right, thank you. What I get from your submission is you're going to majorly focus on justification why these prices have gone up. But not only are you justifying why the prices have gone up, you're also going to look at the quality of the education. That is exactly where I think I'm now just going to kick off the conversation from and engage my brother Hafashimana Asiimwe, who served in the 36th?
32nd.
Yeah, 32nd UNSA government. UNSA, Uganda National Students Association, is a body that governs every student in this country. And to the best of my knowledge, I know we all contribute 2,000 Ugandan shillings to the coffers of UNSA. But we shall get to that. My interest right now is to discuss the role of UNSA, first of all, in advocating for quality education. Has UNSA done what it's supposed to do to advocate for quality education, but also subsidize costs of education?
Thank you, Comrade Drake. Number one, while I share my opinion on this topic, and particularly to the first question you addressed to me, in 1948, when India had just scooped her independence, they asked the then President Mahatma Gandhi the three things that India would go through to ensure that her citizenry would develop, but also it be counted among the developed countries. And number one, he had to lament it was education. Number two, it was education. And number three, it was education. That means as a country, whereas in Uganda, we embark to ensure that we have value products from our education system, then our education must be providing the quality. Because when you look at countries like Singapore, before 1970s and 1960s, Singapore was not doing more than Uganda does in education, but also in the economy. That means Singapore has to revise, or it revised a lot of reforms in higher education system, like other countries consequently followed up. So while you asked me the play of UNSA as a students' movement in this country, if it has had a play in ensuring that Uganda, or as a country, provides quality education, is a question to understand if UNSA has the capacity to do so. UNSA is a body movement for students that gathers all that are post-primary. So by the mere fact of that, her affairs are within the context of students. So issues to influence policy and law remains within the education ministry. And recently it has been cooperated under the Ministry of Education fully. That means whatever is happening.
But Asiimwe,
yes, sir.
Under your mandates, you're supposed to speak on behalf of the students. I am cognizant of the fact that you do not push for policies, but you advocate. That is what you are supposed to do for the students, right? So isn't that within your powers to advocate for the same?
I want to agree with you, yes. And that's why I was coming, in fact. So whereas we do advocacy, while he was the Secretary for National Affairs, advocacy was done, in fact, through media, on TVs, on radio stations. We traversed the country to ensure that we reach to that very child who is in a city school that is established by the government, but also in the first world schools for this country. And while we did that, campaigns were done. That was in the past post-COVID days, whereby we carried Go Back to School campaign, whereby we encouraged even those that were affected by pregnancy, those that were affected because their parents never had money, because they were trying to recover from the COVID-19 negative impacts. So advocacy was done in that alignment. While we move further forward for this discussion, I also wanted to remind our viewers that while UNSA does its advocacy, we are supported by the guild presidents, because the guild presidents all over countrywide, and the district chairpersons, female affairs, secretary for women affairs, finance secretaries at the district levels for secondary schools. Those are our immediate closed structures, whereby if you want to say something and you want to drop it down to the school grassroots level, then these are our structures that we go through. So while we do our advocacy, we ensure that we have the backup of the guild serving leaders, then outstanding. And while we do that to provide the quality education, there are some essentials whereby when you are going to school, you must have. For example, the topic of today, if we are paying high fees, high tuition in schools we are going to, maybe UNSA can come out and air a voice, advocate, maybe petition the parliament, ask the government. Recently, in fact, one of my colleagues has petitioned parliament, the speakers, why there is an increase in school fees, yearly, things of the sort. But we have also had universities strike over increment. In 2020-2021, the then Comrade Sempija did the same on the 15% increment in Makerere University. In Kyambogo University, while I was serving as a GRC about 3 years ago, the same was happening. Not because we really are striking, but we are only trying to show our dissatisfaction on how the schools are asking our parents to sabotage them to pay a lot of money in fees. And of course, UNSA has severally come out to air out voices of the young people, and ours has been ideally advocacy. So while I address on behalf of students, I also wanted to remind our colleagues that we have the current executive member serving for UNSA, and I have also seen them advocate. Recently, you saw news from around Busoga, I think Jinja or whereby school-going children were using parking sand to make pads for themselves, sanitary pads. And I have seen UNSA come out to, in fact, cry for the government. Our current government, I think in 2016-17, there before elections by 2015, President Museveni promised to distribute, I think, sanitary pads to the girl child. And I have not seen that effect. Maybe to would say, has that one also has to do with supporting the girl child in school? It's with an exception of seeing and comparing his parents and students to pay high amounts of money in school in schools. So while we share today, the advocacy around the Uganda National Student Association has been an outcry to the government, but also to the ministry, but also other stakeholders. While we see into the near future, in fact, the then president of America, Franklin, Abraham Lincoln, had this to say, I continuously see the future crying, because the current affairs are managed by those that have the capacity to influence. So when you look at power money, it is for the people who have been able to accumulate wealth. And in the end, I see the republic crying. Those were his words. So while I sum up to this very notion of the same question of how UNSA has been able to come in to advocate for their students, the issue has not ceased. We are still continuing. And this is not just about UNSA. It is about anybody who is young. Because what we do today affects the current generations. Because when you look at the agenda 2063, it was drafted for 100 years' time. Because it was first drafted in 1963, immediately after Kenya's independence. So while that happened, do we see that even those who drafted it then, are they still alive, all of them? Some of them have died. So they were trying to pave a way. When you look at the goal number 4, providing quality education from the Sustainable Development Goals, it has the same stresses. Where you find that I and you should advocate for today's education so that the future all generations to come before us, or even within us, can benefit. So the question is the increase of school fees in schools today in Uganda justifiable? So while we discuss this topic today, we must agree it is either viable or it is not viable. Is it even palatable?
All right.
Yeah.
Jotham, just quickly before I come to Joel, I'm on the question of justifiable, whether it's actually justified. I think that's something you'd also tackle. But in handling that, I'm interested in us understanding, first of all, how education has evolved in our country. Our country retrieved or got independence in the year 1962 on the 9th of October. And if I told you to make a comparative analysis with the quality of citizenry of then, the generations of our parents and grandparents, in terms of those who went to school, you can see a clear-cut difference. Today, they complain that the students or the quality of students that are coming out of school today are more like crammers who do not actually think outside of the box. Now, in questioning the aspect of whether the increase of school fees is actually paying or having a ripple effect on the quality of the students that we are producing, some will argue that there is a clear-cut difference, that we do not have that quality in the students, while others would say that we actually have quality students. But I want you to speak from the perspective of a rural person, someone who is going to a school down there in Kitgum or in Oyam or down there in Kubi, who doesn't have the access to the so-called first world schools that we're talking about today, whether they'll actually be that quality citizen in response to the increment of fees.
Thank you so much, Drake. In relation to what you're saying, if you realize things keep on changing, as you have said, if you relate with our parents studying in the past days and in today's current world where the current syllabus is focusing and schools are into competitions to see that let this cram, pass and go. That's what is happening in institutions these days. Institutions are not focusing on academic, they are focusing on academics, right? But at the same time, they are also focusing on business, that we either have maybe 20 first grades or 20 students with 20 points to see that they achieve what they want.
Yeah.
But when you talk about people in local or rural areas where we are having the seed schools is talking about the local schools, the local initiative schools that are being started currently right now, where at least out of those schools, maybe if you start from the universal primary school, that out of 100%, only 20 continue, and out of those 20, the ratio 15%, those are boys who are proceeding, and the 5 are girls. Recently, I was watching the parliamentary proceedings when Honorable Kaduchi was questioned about that. Even the minister was talking about that. But we are having challenges in terms of resources in the local communities, in the local schools, basically. At the same time, the ratio or even the incentivization of seeing that these students are out of them who are benefited outside. If you see that out of maybe the 20 I've told you, if they proceed maybe to seed schools, and people will see maybe these are dropouts, they will not see education or academics as a very vital something. However much you find that even tuition is very less according to these seed schools.
But Jotham, even in those seed schools, we may argue that tuition is less. But you realize, or according to the statistics by UBOS of the year 2022, provides that 41% of Ugandans live in abject poverty.
Yeah, true.
That means they survive on less than $1 a day. And then you tell a parent, of which majority of our population are really best, to pay tuition of, let's say, worth 20,000, of which you cannot raise 3,000 in a day. That's expensive.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Sure, it is. But at the same time, we need to, okay, Drake, we need to be honest with this. We need to first see that education as a key. We need to talk to parents in these local communities, because this child is going to spend four months at school of 3 months.
Are you then suggesting that
no.
on that? No, the thing is, education, in my opinion, should not be a commodity that you go and purchase. It should be a common good that everyone has access to, because ignorance is expensive, very expensive.
Yeah, sure.
So it would be the responsibility of the government to educate its citizenry. I applaud them for coming up with programs such as UPE and USC, but it's also highly questionable. Well, which I think now that is something maybe our debate should focus on. And I think your point that you're trying to drive to is that parents should maybe try and adopt to that. But we look at even the options that they have. It's devastating.
Yeah, because right now, with our currently policies from the government are not clear enough. So we need to find a way, as we advocate, as it's talking about, as we're advocating for good quality education, let us first utilize what we have. We shouldn't first push these students to go back home, we sit and we wait for good schools. If government has provided maybe the seed schools or the local, the universal secondary schools and universal primary schools, currently, how have in my community where I come, we have the PTA meeting. Sometimes you find the 10,000 shillings that is allocated this out. It's not coming, but these guys do a community work to see that they educate their students to come out. So as we wait for the government, as maybe other stakeholders are pressurizing the government to come up with better policies, I don't know which they may not come because this song has been there in places for a while. Let me tell you an example. I want to applaud. Do you know that UPDF civil servants, UPDF servants have their own schools?
They educate the children. Yeah, I'm quite aware of that.
Do you know that they're among the best schools? They do perform.
I'm not alive to that fact.
No, they do. I'm a product of that. That's why I'm here. No, it's Masidi Ahmed Barak. So I'm telling you that if we have such collaborations, if parents can unite, because however much we cry to the government, I don't want to say it has failed, but in actual sense it has failed. If you can allocate only 10,000 shillings to a whole year, but how best can we come up as a team? Because if you unite together, you can get something out of it. You can educate your children. Because let us not focus at the 20,000 shillings, Drake. If we are focusing at it, but we are looking at investment. Education, you are not relating as it as investment, but this is the hugest investment, you say, because Nelson Mandela says it clearly that the best investment you can give your child is education. Okay. So if the best thing I think we can do is educating the local natives from the local backgrounds, that education is a key, because totally in the villages I've visited across Uganda, have been to north to west. If you go, there is a universal primary school I know, they pay 2,000 shillings. Just a contribution fee, 2,000. But the parents, when we were in a PTA meeting, we had gone with some civil
But what's the quality of the education?
The quality of education, trust me, they have never even got a distinction at first grade.
No, that's what you're talking about.
That's what we are trying to see.
Yeah.
We are trying to do a collective energy. Because the reason why this child is not going to get a first grade, first of all, the teachers are not incentivized. You find 3 months, they are not paid. The child is not also interested. This is a child who will come for, actually they are part-timers. You need to visit these schools before we blame people. These kids are part-timers. You will come in the morning, go back afternoon, graze. He feels like maybe let me come back at 3 p.m. to go for this class. If he's not, so there is a whole chain that really we need to trace. Or either we need to do a monitoring and evaluation properly to see that how best we can come up with a clear education plan in this law. Students are not incentivized. Teachers are on their own. Head teachers spend even a week without coming to a school. So things are on their own, but that's why we need to see if we sensitize the natives, we sensitize these people, we tell them that education is a key. If you follow up on your child, if you follow up on the report, you have a right, as these local natives, they have a right to go and question the institution. That why are we having poor performance? My late grandfather was one well-known in the whole community, would visit all government institutions to question them, why are we not passing? I remember there is a time where I used to go buy newspapers, this past PLE, distribute to all government entities, because he felt that this is, they used to call it Obulungi once, this is a collective effort. All of us were included. If your child doesn't perform, he has failed our village. So we need to work together as a team before we blame ourselves, because also the people in those institutions have problems. Kids are part-timers.
It's all right. Joe,
Yeah.
he brings a very unique perspective to this debate, focusing also on the side of the students, but also on the government as well. But for me, I'm interested in the government, because the government and the citizens have a social contract.
Yeah.
In the constitution, we vote or put into power these people. We entrust them with our vote with the belief that they ought to deliver on the basics of the community. And those basics are health, education, good roads. Those are the three key basics that run an economy. So if you have a functional health system, you have a robust and very good education sector, then you have good roads. I think the economy can run smoothly and perfectly. Education is my focus. The government has, for somewhat, registered tremendous achievement in seeing that ever since they came into power, a few weeks ago they celebrated so-called Liberation Day. And the illiteracy...
No, it is Liberation Day, not the so-called.
The so-called.
Hey.
Some people would say so, critics would say so, but Liberation Day. And they have highlighted the fact that there has been a decrease in illiteracy rates, of which I would still dispute that fact. Other people would argue that the government is very good with bringing numbers, but yet in reality, people are actually literate. So let us look at the reality right now. I want the conversation to focus on UPE schools and USC schools. They released PLE results a few weeks ago. There has been a slight improvement. We have seen more girls performing better than boys, even with the recent released Senior 4 results. Yeah. But also, even with graduates in universities, Makerere has seen more girls graduate more than boys. But my interest now is on the quality. With over 78 or close to 80% of unemployment rates, with his huge amount of fees that we're paying, are students really getting the value for their money after spending all those millions of money, and then you end up on the streets?
Thank you so much, Onen. It is a very, very interesting debate, and it is having a bipolar kind of ideas that cut across. But before we attach value to education, I think it is prudent to first dig in the trajectory and come up with things that can actually substantiate the quality of education vis-a-vis the quality, the value. So when we're speaking value, I think we have to have a dichotomy of values, and that is acquired value and innate value. The innate value that comes with what? That is inborn, and the acquired value that we actually just get them from the environment. And that's where the education setting will trickle in.
Yeah.
You know, if we are supposed to attach value, and just like you've put out, you've said there is an improvement in performance. Girls are performing more than boys, and it has been recorded. But the question should also be asked, which regions are performing well? And if it is capitalized, I mean, there is a specific region that is performing well.
Let's just be blunt. Central region.
Central region.
And maybe some schools in the West.
And that is so singular.
Yeah.
Because if the performance is not pluralized across all the walks of life, across all parts of the country, I mean, up the last person down, then we cannot celebrate that. It is not so prudent to celebrate. Because if success is only registered in a given area, someone said, when my neighbor is in turmoil and me, myself, I'm well, that does not give me the honor to celebrate, because what is affecting my neighbor tomorrow is going to sabotage me. And here, now that the majority are the ones that are affected, it kind of it's alarming. Because if it is only the central region that is performing, then we have quite a number of things to do. Then if we're attaching a value to education and the money that the parents are spending, I think we have lost it, in the sense that people right now want to record the aggregates. And I think it is very wrong. It's not so prudent to actually base on, because the kind of education that we are having lately is more of the one that is focused on memory check. That the other one that is supposed to be so much to deal with someone's personality, values, conduct, and so on.
Yeah.
So parents are so much, fixated to the fact that they should have grades. Those are 4 aggregates, 8 for 8 in O level, and 20 for 20 in A level.
And then the
And
first
they
class in
and
university.
the first class in university. But the question is, can these people that produce these results, can they actually defend it? Because you have interacted with people that actually had their 4, had their 8, and if you give them
Platform.
a platform, they cannot actually
Defend it.
defend these qualifications. So I think it is very not much well packaged to say that we are going to celebrate performance of people who have gotten 8, because that is not a yardstick to use to measure. And we have responsibilities to play in both ends, and that is to begin with the parents. I talked about the innate value. The parents have a role to play as far as if they want to record the value of their money. Because recent time, given the fact of globalization, industrialization, the internet, hula baloo here and there, that people are actually so much, parents no longer have the time for the kids, their children. They don't do what parents should do. But I'm not discrediting the other parents that are doing their roles, because there are those parents that are really into parenting and so on. You cannot downplay their efforts. But the majority, children no longer have that parent interaction. And if at all you're supposed to attach value to your money, and in the first place, you as a parent, you need to give your child a foundation to grow up and know how to attach value to money. Because Theodore Roosevelt, the US president, one time said, to educate a man in mind and not educate the manners, it is educating a menace in the society.
True.
That's how you can have people that are so educated, but what comes out of them doesn't substantiate.
So just before you proceed, so does that mean we have created a lot of menaces in this country in forms? Because where we are at the moment, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we are so driven by tokenism, by want for small monies, and forgotten our values at what makes us who we are. Sure. Our education somewhat seems to actually have failed us. So is it your suggestion that irrespective of the amounts of money we pay now in schools, we are actually not getting an education?
I will not say that, because it's like I said, it's a bipolar conundrum, whereby as a student you have a role to play, the parent has a role to play. Before we invite the government, because I don't think it is so wise for us to always cry out the government has done that. They will put the structures, the government will put for you the structures. Some policies are just toothless barking dogs. And you cannot sit out there and actually expect the government to do more for you when you, as the person who's supposed to give the foundation that is very imperative for a student out there before they come out of your home. What have you put? What values have you put? What values have you attached to your student before you put the money? We so much put our minds into how much we're spending than how much we're actually supposed to put. I mean, money is important, but there are some things that money can't buy. Values. Values are so important. And if you do not have values, I mean, it's just like someone said, it's like a golden ring in a swine's snout, because a swine doesn't know the use of a golden ring. Because as much as you put money on someone, when they do not have the values, they cannot defend the values. I mean, what are they going to do at the end of the day? That's why you're going to find students that are going to step in school, they are going to go out, and they're excited to be at school, because I think it is the only opportunity they have to actually express themselves, because they are not in the hands of the parents. Because actually they were not in the hands of the parents from day one. They grew up with maids, and stepping out of school, they're not going to do anything different, because they don't know how to attach value to money.
So in a nutshell, are students actually getting value for money? Are parents getting value for money?
It would be. It would be.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, I would say there are those that are getting money, there are those that are getting the value for money, but it is not it's not so diverse. People are not getting it to that point, because the sense that if you're supposed to get value for money, we are supposed to what? Okay, attach value to that money. But if the majority are just based on the hawks of what? Of the results. I'm going to call that value.
All right.
Please.
Interesting perspective. But I am still inclined to believe you highlight a number of issues, from the role of parents in making sure that they upbring their kids, but also to the role of schools themselves. But you also highlight in your submission that parents first of all need to attach value to the students before they go ahead and complain of the amount of fees that they're paying in school. But how about that person who is in the rural area, who has attached value on their child? You know that kids who are in the rural areas, whose parents have groomed them well, have brought them and they have the values that you mention, but the parents don't have the capacity to pay them in the schools. Even in the local, in the poorest of schools in the villages, some parents who have attached value to their children do not have the capacity. I would love to submit that rural children are very disciplined.
True.
Yeah.
Rural children are very determined. What they lack is opportunity. Now, that is where the conversation is, which I want to bring you back, Oprah. For that local person whose parents have attached value to them, who has been brought up upright, and who has every desire and zeal to attain an education, but doesn't have that opportunity because their parents lack the resource to pay them in school. But even if they do, the quality of education is not sufficient to actually make them the citizen they want to become in this country. Make your submission.
I will relate that question to a survey I did late last year. I was not looking at a rural area per se, but I was looking at an urban region, what you would call a slum, yeah, where you have education is more of something you would see that everybody says, oh, there is education. But then when you really get into what people in slum areas face, which I would compare with what rural areas face, is that there's no education going on. Education is at the surface, but when you really get in there...
It's just business.
Exactly. So one thing I saw with those children in the slum areas is that their parents have given them the morals that they need. They have given them all that they can offer. Because you realize these are parents who themselves have not been in the education system, right? And because we do emphasize education, or take my child to school, do this, then a parent then sits down and says, okay, personally, I did not go to school. But here I am, I can ably take care of my family. And even if I'm to take my child to school, I have to, strike a balance between food and education. I have to strike a balance between making sure that they are clothed and going to school. So when they really look, and even looking at the schools which they can afford, really, such schools are not there, right? These are opportunities that they really do not have any access to. So what does a parent in this sense do? A parent really does their best to groom up a child. And one thing I would really love to tell to the young children out there, more so when you're not able to access an education, but your parents have given you values, that is what I would call a sort of like informal education. So one thing I realized with most of these kids that we were relating with is that they're doing their own things. They are running businesses because at the end of the day, they will tell you we are studying for money. They have not been taught that, okay, maybe education can get you this, can get you this. In their heads, education can get you money. So here they are, and then they're doing petty jobs, trying to make a living. Even when you go in the rural areas, for example, where I come from, it was school period, but children were out in the gardens harvesting maize. And this was like very early in the morning. They were harvesting maize. By the time we passed by again, maize was already in the local markets, and they were already selling maize, and it's the children doing it. Others were boiling maize. In the night time, it's like a cocoon of maize. Maize is what really tones down. It's really what sets the pace for conversations in the evening. So you have a child doing business all the way from morning to the end of the day. And the truth is that this child, the money that they get from these places, if if a child really loves education, if a child, if a parent has taught their child the value of education, you will see children who will get that little money that they put, because at the end of the day, they're going to use some to support their families, but then they will put some aside, yeah, to at least be able to go to these UPE schools. And one thing I have noticed is for children who really love education, and that is because their parents have taught them that, okay, education is good, but we just can't afford it, you will see them thrive. You will see a child who is very disadvantaged, but because they have a particular goal, a particular passion, they have a form of determination that gets them even through the worst form of education, where they have no access to textbooks, no access to teachers, but they make use of the little that they have, and then somehow things work out. Because one thing that happens also in the rural areas is that when a child performs exceptionally well, and I'm talking maybe A level 8 points, 9 points out of 20, that's a really good student. Usually the local district council then adds for them points, and they're able to come to these privileged universities here in Kampala and also at these government universities, and then they're able to study for free. But this comes from a child who...
But on that point about those opportunities of scholarships, my O-level, I was in a school called St. Joseph's College Laibi in Gulu. It's in northern Uganda. It's a boys' school. And those opportunities that the local council offers right now, Gulu is a city, they're quite limited. And even the people, in terms of how they grant those opportunities to people, somewhat questionable, because they give the opportunities to relatives and friends. And the actual person who deserves it doesn't get it. That's why we are still questioning the cost of education in this country, because the people who actually deserve or want to get an education in this country do not have the capacity to, and yet they want to, yeah? So how can we then hope? How can the government come in to intervene in the situation? Because I think we may argue that at times we need to have as a community, we can do as much as a community. But the government has every resource in its capacity and might to change the situation. What can they do different to help that person, in a nutshell?
When it comes to government, I believe this government issue, you see...
Talk about it.
I would really, if we are talking government and government really hearing the cry of the people in terms of education, and then telling them to do something, it is like telling a monkey to cut down a forest. A monkey survives on a forest. Yeah. Most government officials have hands in these different education sectors, in schools. They are part of the board. They are part of these different areas. Some even own schools. So when you want to bring in measures that maybe curb something like a minimum rate of school fees, maybe to make education accessible for everyone, or trying to bring in an equitable factor, right, depending on maybe your region, depending on how much you earn, and then trying to bring a form of equitable education where everyone in their different capacities can at least access education, then you find that these different players who would have the solution to make these different policies are then hesitant, because this was something that was on the floor of parliament, and it's not the first time. It has even come before, but somehow it's silenced. It's a conversation that can go on for 2 weeks, and then there is a really heated up debate via social media, and then it comes down. No one does anything about it, and I believe it's because these are key players in those different things, and there's a lot of selfishness surrounding that system. Very few people have the heart of education. Very few people see where education can take us as a country. So I think that in a state, if we're living in where the status quo is like that, then I believe it goes back to you as a child. You have to know, what do you want? What life do you want to live? Because those are the things that inspire us. Because when you live in a surrounding where everything is sort of against you, then you have to find motivation and inspiration from somewhere else, and then that drives you to sort of, dodge these different loopholes. And indeed, people make it.
All right. What do you want? Where do you want to be? But unfortunately, you can really want to study so bad. You go to school and they keep on sending you because of school fees, and at the end of the day, end up dropping out.
Yeah, sure.
What can you do? Hafashimana, it saddens me. This conversation is one that I'm very passionate about. Education is something I know it's powerful. It's a tool that can move mountains. It's a tool that can change or transform families. And yet, each and every day, it's a shrinking area in this country. We cry about poverty, we cry about countless things. But education has the capacity of transforming all that. When we were kids, they used to call us leaders of tomorrow, but now we are leaders of now. Yeah? And we're looking at ourselves and we are saying, how are our younger brothers in the lower education going through the system? You're up here and you're looking at how the system is messed, and you're like, what kind of products shall these children be? And that is what worries me the most. The fact that we really have a number of people who are not going to school. We have, yes, the UPE, the USE, the quality is highly questionable. Teachers are not incentivized. Schools are not facilitated, or chalk is not there. Children are studying under the mango tree. When rains come, you don't go to school. Even when you're delivering national exams, you have to cross a river because there are no roads. Is the situation that bad?
You know, I'm a teacher professionally.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher of economics and history. And while I was still a trainee at Kyambogo University, a lot happened. Debates around the curriculum reviews. When you look at the reviews that were made in the 1980s, when you look at the Kajuli report, when you look at the recent revised curriculum for lower secondary, you realize that the recent senior fours we had results released as the last people that have been examined using the old curriculum. And now the question is,
shall we see a change?
In the next? When you read a book of Franklin Benjamin, in his book of Future Growth to Any State, he says that common sense without education is better than education without common sense. He tries to give us a connotation that it is better to have a common sense even when you have not attained that qualification by paper, because you went to university, because you went and did the certificate. We have seen people who in Uganda here have been able to innovate. I have seen students from Ntinda Vocational construct and come up with a tractor. Recently I met it the other day around UNEB, and I was like, these are students, they are doing coursework, and their coursework was to come up with a tractor, something like that. When you look at how the old curriculum has been training us, it is not very much far different from how the revised curriculum is training the current people in secondary schools, senior 1, senior 2. The content has been the same, but maybe the approach has been a little bit revised, whereby it used to be a teacher to entirely facilitate the learners, but today it is the learners facilitating the entire learning environment. So that means there has been a review on how the students are now approaching lessons, but also the content. But the content has not really much changed, apart from a few or some little content that has been abridged in the new revised curriculum. And when you look back where we come from, somehow, somewhere I'm a product of UPE. Though in our side, we used to call it Uganda Pachirentama, UPE, because there used to be much or less impacted to the learners. And that's why we used to call it Uganda Pachirentama, because we are considered to be people who get little compared to those who go to private schools. But I'm also a product of the private schools. Now that is another good news. And while I was there, we used to look at ourselves as people who are getting a better quality education. Why? Because the government has not done enough in the established schools by the government. When you trace back in Chisoro before 1991, before it was made a district then, there used to be very few schools in Chisoro, whereby at the secondary level you used to either go to Chaisidi or Mutorere, where General KK attended. And while such things happened, you would realize that some time back, such products were very good, even up to date. In fact, when you look at a P7 graduate by then, is much more better than a university graduate of today. Why? Because perhaps then there used to be more effort and perhaps innovation and creativity within the classroom environment. I have had debates even when I was serving in UNS as an executive member. I carried out a campaign, even when I was campaigning before I was voted into the same position. And the issue was around our students in up countries or in these unprivileged schools whereby they apply for job to benefit either from district quota or government direct merit. And we used to hear scenarios whereby common schools used to benefit from these slots. At the end of the day, you know, St. Mary's Chitende will benefit most of the slots. You will know King's College Budo will scoop. You will know schools that are better off in Kampala or even up country but are very good. They scoop some of these positions. In fact, you or her highlighted it in your submission and you're like, isn't there corruption at the district whereby maybe district quota is benefited? Who qualifies? Are those slots even enough? Do even our younger people or our students there or our parents there understand that there are some slots per region from State House scholarships? And how many people benefit from that? To benefit from that, you must be a very close friend to a member of parliament.
Not a member of parliament.
Something like that. I just say something like that.
Because you can actually be a close friend to a member of parliament.
In fact, when I came to this discussion, I never knew I was sitting close to a son of a general. He went to an anime school. Maybe, because he went to an anime school. And long story short, as we compare notes here, the question has, in fact, we met the Right Honorable Speaker, Thomas Tayebga, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament of Uganda. And when we met him, I think in our time, we were very clear on the demands of our students, whereby a person who is in a city school established by the current government gets struggles and gets 12 points. Not because they wanted to get only 12 points, by the way, but wanted to get 20. But because of the unfacilitated schools, he was able to get the 12. But when you look at the better schools in Kampala or anywhere where they are, I was in a school whereby I was chanced to see a test tube, but my senior one. But in other schools, where you said they cross lakes and rivers, you say test tube, but time of your neighbor, senior 4. So now, should I compare myself with that student? So when a chance comes and we are scooping through the government merit or district quota, these guys are unprivileged. They are not benefiting because they have not been able to score 17, 18, or 20 points. A person who gets it is whose parent has been able to pay them heavily in Budo, in Namiryango, in Chitende. So shall I compare by the way, at the end of the day when you go to university, these kids from rural schools are performing better. Their CGPA is much more than the person who went to these other, I don't know why. But remember their own government, the sons, in fact the parents of these sons and daughters are still struggling, they have sold their land because education is expensive. When you go to UC where you guys are studying from, you know how much you pay? Your parents has to cough a lot of money. Maybe the question would be, do you get value of that money that you paid because you're from those schools? I have been making research when I was Secretary for National Affairs. I read that Kyambogo University is one of those few public universities where they still pay some reasonable amount of money. When you are a teacher, your tuition itself is about around 600, 700. When you add on your functional fee, I'm not campaigning for anybody, but I'm trying to see, at the end of the day, at least you have heard that Kyambogo University has been producing best teachers on the market. Maybe I would answer your question to him, yes, there has been value for it. The question is that now when you go on government payroll, are you paid worth what you have been able to inject in school fees? When you have been paying your 2 million of money, how much do you get when you are a new staff? 300, 400. That's why I have seen some teachers running from the profession, going to politics. When you look at the MP from Karungu, I think whenever Seungu Joseph, he's a teacher by profession. When you go to Chisoro from Bira North, the MP there has also been a primary teacher before. He ran from the profession, he went to politics. Do you know why?
There could be half other reasons. Let's not accuse the show because they're not here to.
So I'm just giving an example whereby the government has not really invested much in education. It has invested in other sectors. It has invested. You see, the aristocrats have a saying that every time you deny and delay basic needs of life to man, you will easily control them. So when you look at the government we have today, it has, I don't know if it is an interest, but it is developing a clique of rich men and women, and also at the same time developing a huge number of poor people. That's why when you see during campaigns, the government will involve and distribute money. Look at the Imyuga program. Look at the PDM. They take you 100 million per parish to just give you. So can there be a review on how the government should empower? In fact, President himself says it very clear. You put there a chibaro, a calculation. So if you can be able to put in a calculation right now, how will the 10 years time now benefit our current students? You see, you just said that you have seen people studying under tree shades, under mango trees. When you go to Nakasongora, when you go to, in fact, around 2 years ago, students from Mushema were crying, younger people. When you go to Mbarara, the same was happening. The government has not invested much in education, but look at what it invested in defense. Amare, weaponry will be imported from Russia very soon. They are going to be reading the budget by around late June or July, you will see. So, I think, yes, we have peace, but again, peace must match with education. When you look at what we study in primary 5, in P6, in senior 1, parts of an insect, parts of a flower, stigma.
But
the person in China is studying how to make a charger. That's why they are much more innovative. So the question is, what is it possible for us to really change within the education system? It has been designed by the colonialists, you know that. So was it to simply provide a picture among Ugandans, among Africans, that you must only think, in fact, only Quran? In fact, they teach us what to think, not how to think. That's why there has been an aspect of producing only people or students with good grades. In education, we have what we call hidden curriculum. That when you go to a school, can you be able to learn how to sweep? If we found rubbish in a classroom, can you pick it? Common sense. Seeing things wrong and you put them right. That's leadership. So can you also look at the education system whereby it can be able to impart skills? Previously, I think in the last 1-2 weeks we were discussing and we agreed that today's education is only producing students or graduates who do not have practical skills, except those that have done engineering, people like you have done law, because you know at the end of the day, you have to go and practice how to legally advise the community. You have your multi-debates. At the end of the day, you know you have to go to court to see how the judge is handling cases in court. So for you, when you after university, you can easily hang around and see what to do that can bring you something.
Nonetheless, let me just catch you there. We're going to go for a short break. Then shall come back. I'll just maybe give you a few seconds. When you come back, you conclude, and I get to the other panelists. Otherwise, the debate is getting hot, and I think as if you're watching us right now, you definitely want us to continue. But we shall be right back in a few. Just hang in there. See you shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Hey there, dear esteemed viewers. Welcome back from that break. Right before we went into the break, Mr. Hafashimana was driving a very important, crucial point home. So I'll just get to him. He drives that point home, and then we can get to Jotham, and then I have Joel, then we can have the lady come in as well. Asiimwe.
Yes, I was at the verge of making a point that the government has not interested herself to invest much more into education. At the time where Uganda we are in the 21st century, in the fourth current generation whereby we have AI, it's not prudent for us to see kids, young people studying under tree shades. That's why at the end of the day, you have seen a lot of schools be established yearly, annually. You find that in a certain community, 2 schools have been set up. Why? These are in fact private schools. Why? Because parents will eventually take their kids to these schools, because the government established schools are not nice looking, they are dusty, the infrastructure is really very poor completely. And when you look at it, today, if you went at the senior 1 or P7 and you ask those kids who they want to be, none of them would tell they want to be a teacher, because being a teacher keeps them within the same environment in which they are. And perhaps teachers are not role models to those kids. You find the teacher is going to a classroom but he has a bent shoe because they don't get enough compared to what they offer. So at the end of the day, they are demotivated to offer a good service. So in fact, maybe I would simply ask the government, but also those who are really watching us on this space here, that possibly those who can or who do policy framework, the lawmakers who are members of parliament, they can interest themselves in, like what they have been doing in parliament recently. Let there be a revision on how they should subsidize on these high school fees hiking. You realize that in the end, I was telling you that when you get a chance and you're not for government payroll, like I've seen science teachers' salaries increased, there are people who are crying. But he's a teacher of physics and chemistry. But in our minds, we know these people are getting 4 million per month. Do you think that 4 million is reaching? It comes like after 2 months. In fact, when you skip that month, you don't get it. So they are also crying. But when you look at how much they are earning and how much a person who went through their hands, I'm talking a person who is in Uganda Airlines, how much they are earning, you will cry. So where are we heading? So the person who made an engineer is earning little compared to a person they made. Why you get my whole point? The whole point is that there has been a demotivation in the whole system. And where we see the curriculum being revised and all, I was telling you whereby today our runners are still running parts of an insect. You study those parts. Are they helping you today? But if you had decided how to make a charger, how to come up with like a small Samsung phone or Motorola, even when they are no longer working on the market, at least you'll be somewhere very far. What is sellable at the market level right now? Of course, some of those commodities. So I was telling you that when you have done your law, when you have done your engineering, you can easily get where to get some money when you are after university. When you look at the people who are successful today, I was giving a contention of an understanding whereby people who have done these other courses whereby you do not get skills. If you have done accounting and finance, you can easily go into a circle or in a school and you become a bursar. Because at the end of the day, money is moving on and up and down, up. So you have something to do. But look at a person who has studied the courses like...
maybe as you sum up.
As I sum up, yeah. A person who has been able to study, in fact paying heavily by the way, and you have been doing your social sciences, you never got any skills at the workplace or at university. When you look at our multi-companies today, where do you hang around? Can now Airtel start calling people to go and start doing sales immediately after they're in their first years? So that by the time you are finishing university, you have something to do, or you can even begin up something related to that. To sum it up all for this discussion, especially as of now, I think really the government still has a lot to do in investment in education. Yeah, maybe you see we are operating in a free market economy. So I don't know if it is very easy. Maybe the question is it very easy to design a policy or a law to subsidize on the school fees? Maybe you say a university or a school, secondary school, must not charge schools beyond this amount of money. So the question is it possible? Thank you so much.
Jotham, answer that question.
To differ from him, it's impossible. Let's be honest. Also, you know the truth. It's impossible. Because now, currently, private institutions are really suffering, to be honest. These guys are in two loans. If you realize most people who have their own institutions, if either is running it individually or with other stakeholders, they are surviving on loans from banks. So at the end of the day, if you put on the tax from the government, paying teachers and what, sometimes it is very necessary to increase the tuition. because the costs are coming from the government. You realize an institution has to pay KCCA, has to pay URA for operating, has to pay NSSF. At the end of the day, you find sometimes because the cost of living is high. So sometimes it is really necessary for them. But if we have clear laws,
Government interventions.
yes, government interventions, really interacting with different stakeholders, starting from maybe primary, secondary, and university. How best? I remember it happened during COVID time, when institutions were really burdening students to pay a lot of money, if you remember, where they had to cut different costs, the functional fees and what, see that every child can have, every child can acquire education. So it is very vital. It is very vital for the government intervention. But however much that at the end of the day, if we still have stakeholders who are the middlemen, who still have private institutions at the same time running in, having different positions in government, it is very hard. If you see like the Minister of Education, the State Minister of Education, who has over 5 to 6 schools, and this is the person you are sending, is earning a lot of money and has numbers. So it is really very, very, very hard to achieve that, to achieve that as a goal. But at the same time, I always go back to people. It is a collective effort. If we come back, we unite as a team to request for such policies. Things can work out. If you remember, during if the COVID time, where we had one voice towards healthy systems, how things worked out. People would use Twitter, people would use social media, and you'd see things are running out in different health systems. Drugs, were accommodated. And
there is that famous climate chant.
I don't know now.
Just say it.
No.
Together?
We need,
But what are you hiding? You speak.
There is that famous climate chant. Just tell us.
No. I want also to relate on what you talked about. If you remember, I used to serve with Teach for Uganda. It's well known here in Uganda as a volunteer. We used to visit different schools in local settings. They send you there if you are a fellow with Teach for Uganda. So we visited different schools in Namayumba and Hoima, Kagadi, and now they're launching an establishment in Kasese, Mbarara, and those hilly areas, where I would find students, government schools. You know, this is a government school, and you ask, where is the government school? They say it's under that mango tree. It's well established, and people are sitting on blocks, and now they're telling, no, it's well established. This is a government school. They even have a sitting number, and you wonder. So, government has the capacity. Government has the capacity. If you remember, they launched the tabulate tabs, the schemes into UPE, where they distributed tablets. But I think the challenge is the monitoring and evaluation, the follow-up. Because money is going to be released. You will find that Ministry of Education is going to take back some money back to the consolidated fund. Yes, money is there, but how can we follow up? How best can we allocate this money? Corruption is something like now rampant in the education system, where recently the Auditor General was telling us that the government was paying over 1 million ghost workers, and Ministry of Education was part of it, where the district education officers had included different people, different accounts for different people who are not even working for them. So it is better that on a local level, I will insist that we need to sensitize the local natives, our parents, when we go back. It starts with us. Tell them that education is a key. But at the same time, we need to have PTAs in these local institutions that are really, they do sittings and follow up. If they release money for maybe local for UPEs and USEs, that can the head teacher give the accountability? Can the DEO give accountability to that money so that these parents can be certified and it can do their work, than the head teacher every time meeting them saying that the government has not released the money. The government will release money to be, if you read articles, it said I've sent these billions of money, but there is no enough follow-up plus monitoring and evaluation. So it is lacking. So we need to work up as a team. We need to work together. Growing up, I used to watch Makutano Junction. When I was young, it was a nice. But then people used to have TVs on WBS. It was it changes your mindset. If you have time, you can watch it. It changes your mindset. This was a local setting of uneducated people who were struggling. It is a community actually of uneducated people who were struggling. But they valued education compared to anything. I remember, if you watch, there is a lady who would, at least would want to sell all the business so that the child would go back. But one thing that helped them, they used to have a PTA. Whenever they would go in the PTA meetings, they would rise. They say, why is this school performing better than our school? HM, you have the problem. We are chasing you away. But you are chasing the HM away, then who is going to run the school? So it is really vital to include everyone and also to sensitize people on the role of education in our communities. But also us here, go back as ambassadors. They will see you in that good suit, in this good tie. They will know that education is very important. Don't shy out, even though we have random relatives. You are covered by the grace of God.
Right. The conversation gets more interesting by the day and by the time. I'm now thinking of a parent who struggles, gets loans, sells their pieces of land, struggles to take the child through education, only for the child to end up seated home next to him or her under the mango tree in the kitchen for months without what to do.
Yeah, sure.
And yet you have spent millions of shillings, you've sold all your property, and you don't see any value for it. That is pain.
It's really bad.
It's pain. And in the submissions of Asiimwe was advocating for skills. That I was even reading the newspapers a few weeks ago, and they were advising primary children who completed PLE to also look out for vocational institutions instead of only thinking of the normal channel of secondary schools. But Joel, from a perspective of a parent, who knows that that child has to go through the struggle to take their kids to the best schools there is, since most schools are actually put in the central region, take them to those schools, sell all your pieces of land until they finish education. Maybe the kid has actually gotten or attained the highest of grades that there is. But at the end of the day, because this kid is first of all not connected to those so-called big people in government, sits home for months, and the parent is weeping or crying deep inside. How can we change or reverse that situation to see that parents actually get value for their money?
Thank you so much. You know, the pressure is so intense when you get out of the university.
Yeah.
It is when actually face reality. And most people are not ready for what is about to happen after university. So it comes to them as a shock. But as far as looking at the education setting is concerned, I think it is going to be, we pile pressure to ourselves sometimes. Because when we are talking about education, I think when you're talking about the value of education, I think it's also good to define to give a right definition of what is value to education. Why are you studying? So I've ever had this kind of question where after this bachelor's degree, what are you going to do? And that's when you start, drawing pictures and erasing them at the same time. But then what matters is that someone said education is one thing that is very valuable in the sense that it is one thing that you can hold at heart. No one is going to steal it. And it is there. It has come to stay. Once you've gotten education, I mean, you're good to go. But so many, over time, people always attach education to highly paid jobs. But sometimes education is how you reason out logically. solutions we provide to society. And if we actually avert the thought of having education to the peak, or the ultimate target being having a highly paid job, then we are having it the wrong way. Because I think education should not only make us look up to highly paid positions, but also innovate one. The other day I was in the ICT Innovation Hub, the National Innovation Hub of Uganda, Nakawa, yes. And I was taking a research, and I was so obliged to be informed that this is something that has been set out for the youths of Uganda, and if they have an innovation, they can freely go and access this facility free of charge. But it came to me as a shock because I wasn't aware about it. I didn't know about it as well.
You didn't ask them to decentralize it.
You get so many people are not aware of the opportunities out there. So you realize when there is an opportunity for the youth, to step out of university and have something to start up with, away from having the mind of I'm going to get a highly paid job, and they go out and start something on their own, because there's something that you're not ready for, the artificial intelligence. This thing needs an updated version of yourself if you're going to resonate, because if our education has been more than one that is provoking the memory, the AI does it actually 100 times more than you. They have brought this artificial intelligence, and it's going to sabotage people. People who have been in school and all they could do was do the cram work and pass. But right now it is time to get hands-on. The onus is on us to be the ambassadors of letting people know that education is not only targeting the highly paid job that you hear of, but it is something to do with empathy, exposure, and name them.
Networking.
So networking, at least you have an idea that can create and be innovative at the end of the day. That's what matters. So about the ICT Innovation Hub, people are not aware about them, and that's why people, after graduation, they go back to the village and they ask themselves, what next? And that is the agony that the parents are facing right now, because they expect the investment in return, and in most cases the pressure is intense because they expect it there and then. But sometimes it is not, you shouldn't pile that pressure. I don't think it is necessary, but it is, because as a man or any person that has gone to school, you should have at least that thing that you carry, apart from a transcript.
Yeah.
Do you have a decorum, character? Are you problem-solving oriented? You create out and you dish out to the world. Apart from just having a transcript with high grades, what are you dishing out to the world? I think that's what matters. Please.
Oprah, in that same spirit, looks like right now we are reaching towards the end of the show, and we need to talk to young people out there, but also to their parents. He mentioned something very important, that we shouldn't ask ourselves the question, what next after campus? For me, I think the question, what next, we should ask immediately, or even when we are still young. When we're in P7, when we're in Senior 4, when you're in Senior 6, even when you join campus. What next? He pointed out something very important in his earlier submissions. Today, children do not want to look at teachers because they're not incentivized. But we need to change that trajectory altogether. But now let's just focus on the question, what next? What can the students do differently to change the pattern? Because looks like it that the onus is upon us to actually change the status quo. You need to put yourself out there, attach yourself to opportunities, allow yourself to learn, network, among others. But in that same spirit, kindly advise the young people out there on what to do differently to not only to help uplift themselves, but not to disappoint their parents, guardians, or benefactors.
Unfortunately, that's something you can only answer when you've had a good example, because at the end of the day, when you are not knowledgeable about something, then you can't apply. These are things that hit you after graduation, because really you have never sat down to think about what next. And parents do a good job, but at the end of the day, parents do a lot of spoon feeding. They don't even necessarily spoon feed, but they may just really give the fees. And they really don't open up the child's mind to be able to think beyond, I've provided for you, what are you going to do with your life? Rather, parents, for those who can afford, they really just give up the money. They don't have those talks with their children. There's really no career guidance. You know, a parent can take a child all through nursery, all the way to the university, and this parent doesn't even know the talents of their child. They do not know the skills of their child. So when you have such families, then you find a child who cannot, you know, well discover what they are. They don't have any motivation. They don't see why they should do it. There's really no, they think that life works out automatically, which really it does not. So what we should be doing for these children is, because at the end of the day, these are students, these are children, and until they get figures that are able to point them the right direction, because this is even why we have career guidance at the end of the day, because you're going to think what next, but who is going to advise you in that line? You know, who are you going to reach out to? Who are you going to talk to? So that career guidance is so, so important, because majority of Ugandans think that things will work themselves out. You know, oh, I may work for my parents after a year. They don't even really think through. They're just going through a system, and then reality hits. So I think it's so important on the part of the stakeholders for these different children, like play a role. Make sure that you inspire, you give a wider view of life, and you don't just act as a provider, but you're able to see certain things within your child, even when you're a teacher, because these are the people who really help us out. When you're a teacher, when you're a person who really has a say in a child's life, do point out that, hey, I think you can do this. I think you can do this. So when a child goes back and they're meditating on that, and they say, oh, maybe I can probably venture into this, and then that gives them a wider aspect and a wider thought of what they can do. But then also on the part of the children, as a child, you have to do what we call self-discovery. And just like it is self-discovery, you discover yourself. Yeah, these may not be things that, fine, your parents can tell you, so-and-so can tell you, but it's so important to discover beyond the classroom, what can I do? Beyond cramming a few texts, a few equations here and there, what else do I bring to the table? Yeah, we have seen so many instances. You know, back in high school, our teachers always used to say, I didn't want to be a teacher. I just found myself, you know, being a teacher. And when they grow older, we find that now they divert. You see a teacher becoming a counselor. You see a teacher becoming a nurse, you know, and that's the example we're given. So if the people who are then giving us examples were not able to discover themselves, and they discover what they can do later on in life, then we can learn from that loophole that it's important to now discover yourself young, do these things young. And so many times, this creativity may not necessarily be baking, or engineering, or probably, you know, those hands-on skills, but it can be even in your profession. He was talking about social sciences and saying, what is a social scientist going to do? But then study what you are doing. Self-discover. What has been granted to you is social science. So look within that sector. What can I do? What can I do to be able to change this? What sort of innovation, what sort of creativity can I bring to this space? What can I do different in this? That's the only way you're going to leave a sector where people don't really get employment and stand out, and then be able to employ the rest, because you had a way bigger vision. So even when you're doing something that seems off, there are people doing accounting and finance, and when you check if you check on jobs that are maybe going to disappear in the next 5 years, you're going to find that people who are doing accounting and finance, there are no jobs. AI is going to take over that, you know. But then if you're in that space and that is what you're doing, and you have already heavily invested, your parents are heavily investing, and they expect from you, you're already, you know, 2.5 years through the journey, and you can't go back, can you look into what you are already doing and be able to find a way? Because AI cannot take away certain human qualities. You can always think outside the box. I know we have not been taught to think in our system, but it is something which does come off naturally, you know, if you do put in the work. Think through the space that you have. Think through the system that you have and say, I can change this, I can do this, I can bring a sort of solution here. That's the way we get innovators. That's how we get creators, because at the end of the day, these are people who solve the world's problems. So if you can solve a problem, you can help your colleagues who do not have jobs, and you can also help yourself and then make your family proud at the end of the day. So I go back to 3 things. One is that as parents or role models or people really who are stakeholders in the lives of children, do help them think outside the box, help inspire them, help them see new realms. But then as a child, can you discover what you can do? What can you bring to the table? What special talents do you have? Who are you? You know, you may just be a good listener. How best can you use that to create a solution that gives you money at the end of the day? And then the last aspect that we should be talking about in this issue is that you're in a particular field. Maybe you don't have any unique talents. Maybe no one has really told you that you can do this and this, but you're in a particular field. Can you do your research about how you can take that field to the next level, about how you can be that change that really we need to see, and in that way you'll create jobs for yourself, for your colleagues, but also make your parents proud.
In 30 seconds, your concluding remarks.
Mine?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that we can all achieve, even with high costs of education, even without education, you can still achieve. There's so many things that there's so much to life that you can always do. So I want us to really keep an open mind and really use the opportunities that we have next to us, because we are always learning. Education really is the acquisition of skills. So when we look at the formal sector only, we then miss out on the informal sector, which majority of Ugandans thrive on, even throughout the world, thrive on that, and then they are able to then build capacity to go into the formal sector and do so much more. So you don't have to really feel bad that you're not in the formal education. Utilize and work with what you have, and then things can always be better.
All right, thank you. That's been elaborate. My brother, Hafashimana Asiimwe, your way forward and concluding remarks.
At a go, right?
Yes.
Number 1, I happen to be an old student at Cornerstone Leadership Academy, boys' school. And while we were there, not only the focus was to produce students with good grades, but there is always other things that we are taught. Discipleship, character development, not only to simply graduate as a best academician. And while we were there, we were taught a lot of things around the 7 habits of highly effective people. She made a very good argument, Comrade Nkalubo. And while she was speaking, I kept on remembering all of those that we have been taught, but it has been a reminder that while each of us has been born still in the same school, that you are born with an imaginary skill that you can sit there and imagine. And wherever or whatever each of us has gone through, then we have to always have the aspect of self-awareness, self-actualization. Even when I'm at the university, even when I'm in my vacation of senior 4 or senior 6, or what is this that I can be able to do to earn something? If I have been a graduate of social sciences, of development studies, what is that I can be able to do? Can I begin up an NGO? Can I associate myself with people already into that sector that I can easily understand how to come up with a good concept note, a good, all those kind of designs. And the other one was an aspect of independent will, that from one day anywhere you can come out and say, no, I think I can begin up this. I can get Comrade Jotham, I can get Joel, I can get Onen. We begin up something. So we have an independent will to do and decide on our own. And when you look in the near future, unless there is a drastic change in whatever is happening today, then we are going to have a loss. She just made sure that she mentioned that not that everything that a man has born with is going to be taken up by the AI. There are things that you are born with that you cannot. I don't think AI can come here and start trimming off your hair. That has to be a skill for a human being, that you can get a machine and start cutting people's hair. You earn money. I don't think AI will also come and say, let us now print hair for women. that will still be upon incumbent or human being. Now, long story short, I just wanted to conclude with what maybe some of us have not been able to hear of, but happened in 1960s. There was what you call the 1968 Olympic Games in the UK. And in Uganda, we never had a representative. But we had one from East Africa generally. By then, it used to be the three countries, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. So there used to be a guy called Akwali Stephen. And he has been a renowned Tanzanian runner. So he had to present, in fact, Africa in general. And while he began the race in the stadium, he had a lot of complications and things were happening all around. And I think this is my message to our students, but also to every stakeholder, the parents and the government. And in the end, this race was supposed to end 2 hours time, but he crossed the finishing line beyond past the 2 hours. And while the spectators, while the referees were trying to find out who is that runner that had not yet entered the stadium, the result was an African runner, John Akwali. And while this man was entering the place, the referee had to blow the whistle, and other spectators had to return back to the stadium. And everybody came with joy, with love, with support, overwhelmed, supporting the African runner from Tanzania, Akwali John. So while he crossed the finishing line, he had an interview with the journalists. Why he had sustained injuries, and even when he had gotten out of the race, it would be understandable that it was not easier for him to complete on the race. And while each of us is there, we have begun up something. You have either joined P7, you are a candidate, you have joined the senior 3, you have joined your final year or your second year, and you have a lot of challenges you are going through. Maybe the fees is not coming on time, your parents are being suffocated to provide for you the basic needs, and you feel like you are giving up. Behave like Akwali John from Tanzania, then in the 1968 Olympic Games. So he told these journalists that I was sent from Tanzania not to begin the 5,000 miles, but I was sent from Tanzania to complete the journey, the race of the 5,000 miles. Similarly, we have begun that race. Let us not just finish, let us not just begin it, but let us also complete it. And in my own kind words, I ask each of us, the ministers, the members of parliament, the youth leaders, the student leaders, to put hands on to ensure that there is a drastic change on the approach and on the methods on how people are treated and provided for within education. Because the government is collecting taxes. When you collect taxes from the public, that means you must provide them with the basic essentials like education, like good health. So it's incumbent upon the government to ensure that it does all that is must be fit for humanitarian. Asante Bwana.
Thank you. Jotham.
I'm not going to turn into a motivational speaker.
These are realities. These are realities of nature.
They are, but really, those were good words, and they were inspiring and encouraging words. Sometimes people need to hear such words to be revamped, to be sitting. I want to encourage everyone outside there that we shouldn't wait for the government. Some of us here, we come from humble backgrounds, struggling even maybe to be here where we are. We made it, and we are still seeking ways to see how we can accomplish our journey. But she talked about a very important and vital information that we need to grab spaces. Our parents may not teach us to grab spaces, but this is something that really we need to come out from our comfort zones, and we seek for spaces. Yeah. If there is a civic space here, TV, seek for a space how you can join. Grab those spaces. Even the great old politicians, they will tell you that they were looked for to come and join maybe either UPC, NRA, because they were active. So be active, engage in those spaces, because there are opportunities there that are waiting for you. Discover yourself, because that's also one of the important things, that if you discover yourself, you will know your target, you will know your ability and how best you can focus on it. Because if you don't discover yourself, at the end of the day, you get lost on the journey. You will want to try all things. You'll be in education, sports, what. At the end of the day, you may end up being lost on the journey. But I want to encourage you, these spaces are very hopeful. Maybe I do journalism, and there is something that we say at Media Challenge Initiative, that journalism can make our world a better place. Without journalism, so if you have such platforms here that where you can air out, where we can even ask government to see how it can intervene hand in hand with different stakeholders, the civil society organizations that are really willing to come and help. We have a number of them, but are being limited by the government, questioned here and there. We have the private sector foundation, we have the private entities, the schools that are really struggling. How best can government help them out to see that they run and give services, because they're giving out many jobs to people. But at the same time, we need a quorum where students are heard. We have had UNZA. I don't want to go there. We have had UNZA for a while, and we have had different bodies. But really, we need to get out from our comfortable zone. That we need to see that students' views are aired out through either parliament, maybe through different education sectors that are really into different stakeholders. You need to come back on ground and ask, visit these schools, visit the SID schools. Let us not go on reports after the report being tabled on the table of parliament, and we leave it outside there. As we leave, I encourage you, believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, you will achieve all what you desire for. Thank you.
Someone said they were going to become a motivation speaker,
did.
but eventually they didn't. But anyway, it has just come in. Government bans building fees in schools.
In fact, it was yesterday. Monday vision.
Yes, so that is something I think you should take note of that and applaud.
But if the ban is if the ban is that, is it ready to increase the funding, the capitation grant? That's another question now.
Well, that is something.
But it might come up because banning, it is banning building fees. Tomorrow the school is going to change the word into functional fees. So yeah.
Let's just have a quick closure from you, Joel.
Thank you so much once again to be here. It's been a privilege, and to have a discussion with formidable leaders of tomorrow, or if not of today. It is
the reality is of now.
So to sum up, I would love to send a word out there to every youth and every other person who's not a youth who needs it, because it is an era where we need information to see to it that life keeps on going. To avoid any kind of shock, you need to be informed, and it is an era where there is a lot of short-term gratification as far as life is concerned. People expect to actually reap where they didn't sow, and they call it what? They call it luck. I would love to beseech everyone out there not to live by luck or live by fate, but rather have a goal and destiny. And when you wake up in the morning, you know that you're waking up for something. Let things not hit you by accident. If luck should fall on you, let it fall on you when you're working. And that's what you're supposed to do. So to every youth out there, find what you are good at, do it. And if you've got what you are good at, don't do it for free. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Today we have actually had motivation speakers on the show. But nonetheless, it's been very exciting. And I must say, kudos to all of you for the brilliant and wonderful submissions that you've had for tonight's discussion. And I must say that our country is richly endowed with young, brilliant minds such as yourself. I hope the submissions don't just end on talking and actually act. That's very important. You know, young people are very articulate at breathing English out of their noses.
Ours was to compare notes and share to the public.
But nonetheless, as you also share notes with the public, guide them as well.
Definitely.
Do the action. Be the ambassadors, but not just ambassadors, but also engage with them. Get your hands dirty and do the work. Otherwise, my name is Douglas Drake. I've been your moderator for tonight's conversation. Tonight, I've been discussing the cost of education in this country, whether the students or parents actually getting value for their money. Join us next week again for the same kinds of conversations. This is Civic Space TV, brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance. Thank you to the technical crew for sparing time to be with us. Otherwise, have a blessed week. Bye-bye.